You know that one piece of advice every nervous student gets before heading off to college? Find your people. Make sure you feel like you belong. The whole idea is that fitting in is the secret sauce for getting good grades and, actually sticking it out. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the evidence tells us something different?
I mean, it just feels right, doesn't it? It's intuitive. If you feel accepted and supported on campus, of course you're going to do better in your classes. This idea is everywhere, in those big university welcome speeches, on parenting blogs, and it's definitely in the back of students' minds. But what happens when we really put that popular belief under the microscope?
All right, so the belonging assumption. This idea is so powerful because it taps into something totally fundamental about being human. We're social creatures, right? That need to connect with others doesn't just switch off when you walk into a giant lecture hall. The thinking goes that if that need is met, a student is then, free to focus on the hard stuff, like organic chemistry.
So, when researchers talk about a sense of belonging, what do they actually mean? It's not just about having a few friends to grab lunch with. It's this deeper, more fundamental feeling of being truly accepted, respected, and supported by the entire college community. It's a really powerful concept, and for years, we've thought of it as an absolutely critical ingredient for success.
But is it? A team of researchers recently decided to give this whole idea a massive reality check. They did what's called a scoping review, which is basically a huge project to map out all the existing research on a topic and see if the evidence actually holds up.
And when I say massive, I really mean it. They didn't just glance at a couple of studies. No, they systematically pulled together and analyzed 69 different research reports on this very topic. This wasn't some casual look. It was a deep, comprehensive dive into the data. And they didn't just look at what's new either. They pulled in 2 full decades of studies, all the way from 2003 to 2023. This gives us this incredible long-term picture of how this stuff has been measured, and it gives their findings some serious weight. So, after combing through 20 years of research, what did they find? Well, if you were expecting a simple slam-dunk confirmation of what we all thought was true, you're in for a bit of a surprise. The link between belonging and success was, well, it was messy.
What's really telling is the language the researchers used themselves. They wrote that they found an unexpected level of heterogeneity. Okay, heterogeneity is just a fancy scientific way of saying the results were all over the place. They just weren't seeing one simple, consistent, strong pattern.
And this right here gets to the absolute heart of it. On one side, you've got the popular belief, a simple, strong link. More belonging equals more success. Easy. But the actual research, it paints a much more complicated picture. The review found that, most of the links were positive, but they were small. And get this, some studies actually found a small negative link, a situation where a higher sense of belonging was tied to slightly worse outcomes. That completely flips the simple story on its head. But hold on, the story doesn't end there. Just because the overall connection is weak doesn't mean belonging is unimportant. Far from it. In fact, the researchers uncovered a critical exception to the rule. A group of students for whom that connection becomes much stronger.
And this, right here, is probably the single most important finding in the whole review. For the general student population, as you can see, that association is pretty small. But look over at that second bar. For students from minoritized groups, the researchers found a clear pattern of much larger associations. For these students, feeling like they belong seems to be way more critical for their academic success.
So, who are we talking about specifically? The review found this stronger link for racially and ethnically minoritized students when compared to their peers. It also highlights women in fields like science, technology, engineering, and math. Disciplines that have historically been very exclusionary. In those kinds of settings, the psychological safety that comes from belonging seems to play a much bigger role.
Now, just as important as what the research found is what it showed us we're missing. This 20-year reality check actually exposed some major blind spots in how we've been studying student success all this time.
So if we're trying to build a complete picture of student success, what are the crucial details that researchers have been kind of overlooking for the past 2 decades?
Well, it turns out, a lot. The review found these huge gaps in the data. So many studies just failed to report on key student identities. Things like if a student is the first in their family to go to college, their disability status, or their social class. At the same time, the research has really hyper-focused on certain types of colleges, which means amazing and important institutions like community colleges are seriously understudied. It means the picture we have is based on a very specific and pretty incomplete slice of the real student experience.
So where does all this leave us?
It means we have to get a whole lot smarter about how we support students. We have to move beyond this idea that there's one simple, one-size-fits-all solution to success.
The big takeaway here is this. A sense of belonging isn't the silver bullet we all thought it was. It matters. It absolutely matters. But it's just one piece of a much, much bigger and more complicated puzzle. A puzzle that includes everything from financial aid and academic prep to mental health support and just plain good teaching.
So what's the game plan going forward? Well, first, we've got to challenge this myth that belonging is a cure-all. Second, it means we should get strategic and focus our efforts to foster belonging on the very students for whom the evidence shows it matters most. And third, we need to demand better, more inclusive research that actually fills in those blind spots so we can finally see the whole picture.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really crucial question. This isn't about giving up on the idea of belonging. It's about getting smarter and integrating it into a much more sophisticated strategy. So if there's no single magic key, then the real challenge becomes this. How do we build complex, supportive, and truly equitable institutions where every single student gets the chance to succeed on their own terms?